Good morning and welcome to the Well of Wellbeing, our interview series. Today we're going to be tackling a very challenging subject. My guest today is Allene Hatherell. Now, Allene is a CBT psychotherapist. She's an accredited therapist, a lecturer at Destiny College. So she's got a huge amount, a wealth of knowledge to share with us. So suicide, of course, is very challenging, and the rates of suicide in the UK and in Scotland as well are trending upwards at the moment. And I was looking at some research the other day up to 2018, and I think it's worse for 19, but on average, 2 people every day in Scotland complete suicide, with young men from 16 to 35 being most at risk. So today we're going to maybe explore the risks, the issues that lead to such a devastating decision and action, as well as explore maybe something about suicidal thoughts, what we can do, and seeking a few tips on prevention. So, Allene, tell me first of all a wee bit about yourself, how you became a counsellor and get involved in Destiny College and all of that sort of stuff. So tell us a wee bit about that.
Well, I was originally a nurse and then became a general nurse, and then I became a midwife. And through I had a child that died of a baby that died of cot death, and through that I had counselling, and I always loved the relationship with my patients. I mean, I loved the nursing itself, the practical work, but I loved the relationship I had with my patients. So when I had this experience of counselling, I thought, oh, I'd really like to do that. And so I carried on nursing for a while, but then where I was living abroad, I couldn't continue nursing. So I was able, with my husband's support, to embark on getting the qualifications to become a counsellor, which I did. And then I came back to this country and continued to do some studying, and I actually met you at an ACC event. I think it was in Perth, and you invited me to, I think you were there watching me doing a workshop, I think, and you invited me to become involved with Destiny, which I did, and it's been a wonderful thing. I've loved the teaching there. And so when I came back here, I was with Rape Crisis Sexual Abuse Centre. I worked there for a couple of years, and then I moved to another agency, which was more sort of homeless and sort of people struggling with addictions, and worked there for another 4 years there, setting up a little counselling practice. And then 5 years ago, I went into private practice, and that's what I did until last year when I took a year out, and now I'm back working again, and I didn't break my teaching at Destiny. That's been able to continue, and so currently I'm working online, and I'm just starting a job working for delivering IAP, high intensity IAP service, and so I'm doing that. I've got a few private clients, and I'm teaching at Destiny, so quite busy really.
Brilliant, Ali. Thank you very much. So, lots of experience, and I'm sure you've come across people who have had these. I'm sure you've heard of people with such tragedy. But when we look at the figures around suicide just now in Scotland, and what do you think are the reasons behind such tragedy?
I mean, I'm not an expert, but I think it's hopelessness. I think, it's triggered by hopelessness, that there is no way out of the pain, the emotional pain that these people are in. And I think when it comes to that point of deciding that death is the best option, it's a sense of burdens. They're burdened by this pain, and they actually can believe that families, friends, be better off without them, that they're a burden to their society, their families. And they just can't cope with the pain. Could be financial, it could be relationships, job losses, I think we're going through a terrible time now, because this pandemic is going to affect people in such, I mean, it's just a tidal wave that's going to go through our society. And those that weren't in really secure places financially in their relationships are going to be affected so severely, I believe. They're going to lose jobs that weren't terribly secure, and relationships. Yeah, it's very sad.
Yeah. So you've mentioned some of the risks, like job losses and relationship issues, all of that kind of thing. Do you
Addiction as well, I think,
addiction is and that sense of hopelessness, and sometimes it's a multiplication of, it's not one issue, but sometimes if it's addiction, it can be there's no money, the relationships are breaking down, and all of that sort of thing, and death seems a better way out. I heard recently of a young man in the town I live in East Kilbride, 32 years of age, who took his own life. And when I spoke to his friends, they had sort of laid out flowers and football scarves, the way they do, right next to the tree that the poor lad had hung himself. And I had a conversation with his friends there, and I said, did you have any indication at all? And they said, no. 2 nights before, we were with him, and he was laughing and joking, and he just seemed normal. There didn't seem to be any warning signs.
No. That can happen, and of course there can be a sense of relief to the young man who you're talking about, because when it has been people that have survived suicide, there's been research. A lot of research goes into with the survivors. They get the feedback, and there is a sense of relief because they've made this decision. So there's often, we met him in the pub, he was laughing and joking, because they've made this decision and it's sorted now. There's a way out, and so there's that relief.
Yeah. So
and also sometimes the people that laugh the most and joke doesn't mean that they're not seriously depressed.
Yeah. And so that sounds like if someone's already made a really solid plan of what they're going to do and they've thought it all out, that sense of relief is there, the decision's made. And so it's kind of like they appear quite normal until that, of course, they take that tragic final decision.
Because there's a calmness then, that the chaos is now stopped, that we've got a plan and going to follow through. Yeah.
Strange, just on a completely separate subject, I've got a pal who's been sober a long time, but he was telling me that when he was drinking, that he would have the shakes and the sweats and the anxiety before he got his alcohol, and then he would go to the shop and buy the alcohol, and immediately, even before he'd started drinking, the sweats and the shakes and the anxiety disappeared, and he hadn't drank a drop of it. Strange, isn't it? So I suppose it's a kind of the same thing. The decision's already been made, and so there's a sense of calmness comes over. Okay, great. So what about suicidal thoughts, Allene? I mean, I'm a therapist, and I've worked with many people who have had these suicidal thoughts. It doesn't seem too uncommon. And obviously there are risks from suicidal thoughts becoming actions. What would you say to someone who's having these dark thoughts right now?
I think the more people think about it and go over their own, and internally thinking about killing themselves, thinking about how they could do it, then that normalizes it, and it becomes actually more of a danger that they will actually follow through. So I think it's recognizing that one is having these thoughts, and that they can be leading you to a path that you actually maybe don't actually want to go down. But the more you think about it, the more you plan it, it sort of, as I say, normalizes. It doesn't become, because you're thinking about it all the time, it's not so scary. And it starts to really become a viable solution. So I think it's being able to talk to somebody about that. But that's where the problem is, you see, because if you feel that you're a burden to your family or your friends, or that nobody actually cares, you believe that nobody cares, then you're unlikely to actually reach out. That's the dilemma, really.
Right.
So if you can recognize it and reach out to somebody, then that is definitely, the way to go. And if you can't, then it's really, it's quite difficult, isn't it? Those people are, people that are thinking that way tend to often become more and more isolated.
So what about, let's just say that someone takes up that kind of advice and says, right, I'll reach out and speak to someone. Let's say someone in the church, for example, to a pastor or a growth group leader, and someone from the congregation says, I'm having these suicidal thoughts. What would you say to that growth group leader or that pastor? How should they respond to that initial conversation,
I think just before I answer that question, I think it's wonderful that we've got the Destiny Hope line has just been started up.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing. That someone can call a number anonymously and speak. There's often a lot of guilt and shame attached to suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
But why am I not coping? Why is everyone else coping and I'm not?
Yeah.
So it's quite complex. But in answer, if somebody did reach out to somebody in the church, I think the main thing is not to react, not to try and fix this person. It would be a case of just responding with kindness, giving the person the space, just listening to them and validating their thoughts. Oh, don't be so silly. Don't think like that. That's because they'll shut down and withdraw and go away. So it's listening and supporting.
Yeah. And that can often be the challenge, because we if someone tells us this, it can feel like, to the untrained person, they think, oh my goodness, now I'm burdened with this. Yes. And so because I'm burdened with this, I'll try and fix it.
Yes.
And then I've done my bit.
Yes.
So I think that's often the reason for it. Yeah,
I think it's a case of just, listening, trying to, through that not trying to fix it, but through, building that little relationship, if it's over the phone or physically, so that you can gain a little bit of trust, and that start to instill some hope for this person, but not trying to give solutions, but you could be talking for quite some time, trying to keep them talking, keep listening, encouraging them, and then slowly trying to maybe find out if there is any avenues of support. Often the person does have avenues of support. Sometimes they do not, of course, but sometimes they do. But through this guilt and the shame and the lack of, I'm not coping, people are better off. I don't want to burden them with my worries. They can't reach out. But I've often heard, and I'm sure you have, Pastor Dave, people say, I wish I'd known he felt like this.
Yeah.
I would have helped. Why didn't he come to me?
I think also, as one of the things I learned many years ago, is that I'm responsible to a person, but I'm not responsible for the person.
Yeah.
So I can be responsible to give them the best information, to signpost them to an organisation or to some talking therapies, or just to be there and be their friend and to listen and support and not try to fix. I might want to pray with them if it's appropriate, if it's a member of the church, for example. However, I think that we can often overburden ourselves by thinking we are responsible for the actions that people take. So, the great saying, do no harm. So if I'm just listening and supporting, I'm not doing any harm.
Yes, and being quite bold as well.
Yeah.
Be quite bold about saying, you know, I'm here for you, I'm listening. Have you thought about how you are going to kill yourself? Have you got a plan?
Mm.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah.
But, you know, don't think that, because if they haven't, they'll say, no, I haven't, don't be silly. But
Mhm.
you could actually be, you know, that's okay. You can afford to be wrong. This is
Yeah.
a person's life, so being wrong's fine, but
Yeah.
just be quite bold.
Mhm. Very good. Very good.
I actually had a question on the back of what you were saying about feeling guilty and someone who was wanting or thinking of taking their life. Sometimes help seeking can be very challenging for some people, and for different people, different approaches work, and help seeking is not really a one size fits all type thing. What would you say to someone who feels like they don't want to put a burden on the system or on other people, but they do need to seek help? What would you say to them?
So I think that the answer to that is that we would be taking our time. You know, there is this sense when somebody shares that they want to take their life, this sense of urgency that you've got to fix this. But it's important that you talk, you listen to this person talking, and find out exactly what they want. There's usually quite an ambivalence about suicide.
Yeah.
Want to die, but also want to live, and so this is in place. So we want to try and up the want to live, and how that'll work for that person is unique. And so we need to listen and discover which way forward. Could it be phoning an anonymous helpline? Could it be meeting somebody that they've connected with? In a homeless shelter, there's somebody there maybe, or a cousin, or not their parents, but maybe a cousin that they're particularly they think they could talk to, or a friend. It's just through exploring, finding, and that constant installation of hope. So if they say, well, there isn't anybody, you don't respond to that with, oh, that's awful, you're all on your own then.
Yeah.
You know, you would say, well, that sounds really, really difficult at this time.
Yeah.
You know, can you tell me about your life right now? Just try and keep them talking to build that connection with this person.
And trying to build some hope.
Installation of hope is
the installation
huge.
of hope, because I remember I worked with addictions for a long time, and I've often heard people in addiction saying, you know, I don't want to live, but I'm too scared to die.
Mm-hmm.
And that's quite a common when people are at their worst in their addiction, and all the doors have closed to them, and there seems to be no hope. And I think that idea of instilling some hope is absolutely vital.
When people get to that point, they see the no other choice through financial burden. Maybe they're about to lose their home, they'll be evicted, lost their job, they've lost their relationship. Whatever is going on has become too much, and they don't see a way out. But through sitting with them, and you sit with them on the phone or in person, and just listen and validate their difficulties, and instill that hope, and try and find a way that would work for them. Because there's no point in us giving them, you should be doing this, this, and this, because that isn't going to work. They have to, we have to help them to find a way that will work for them, and support them in little steps, just that little step away from taking their life.
Yeah. I think we have a tendency as humans to want to fix things. It's either we want to fix things or we want to avoid it altogether and not go into a bit of a situation where you can't get yourself out of, and in situations where we don't feel comfortable with, we just don't want to approach it. And I think it's really good to have practical tips of what you can work through in your head to approach someone who may be having these thoughts, and how to
I think helping them, that's a really good point, Sophie, about helping them to find solutions that would work for them. So what little steps could they take to keep themselves safe? Just the little steps, and we create a sort of little plan for them that they really could engage with.
Yeah.
And from a Christian perspective, from a spiritual perspective, it can be a real challenge, because the last thing you want to do is say, well, the Bible says this.
Yes.
And then they just feel shamed, even more so because they're not getting that.
Yeah.
So but there is a sense of how do we bring that sense of God, and because God is a God of hope. He's a God of restoration. He's a God of reconciliation. So how do we find a sense of God and all that without shaming the person who's feeling so far removed from other people, never mind God?
Yes. I think that's a really important point, because they have such people that are thinking of ending their lives can have such feelings of guilt and shame and worthlessness. There's no point in going on. I can't cope. Other people can, but I can't. And the world is better off without me. And they could be feeling very strongly that God doesn't love them. Goodness knows what has brought them to this point. It could be a loss of a loved one, loss of jobs, loss of homes, an addiction issue, so many things. God isn't there for them. So we have to be very cautious about God loves you. God has a great plan for you, and giving scriptures about, that because that will drive a wedge rather than bringing you together with this person.
Mm-hmm.
So we can be Christ's love visible, the hands and feet of Christ for this person, but we have to be cautious about giving platitudes in such a time of pain.
So
I think that's really important.
Better to be Christ-like and show that love and acceptance.
I agree.
For that person, than
Yes.
just tell them that this God that possibly they're feeling so far removed from still loves them. So something in the experience.
I've heard so many quoting scripture. You're in the middle of a really painful time, and someone says, "All God's plans work together for good."
Yeah.
It doesn't help.
Yeah.
It makes the person feel even worse and distanced.
Yeah.
And so yes, it's being love, and
Yes.
and trying to build that relationship,
Yeah.
and instilling the hope.
Very good. Yeah. So it's better to be an inspiration than to give information.
Yeah, and doing it gently. I think what Sophie said earlier about trying to fix things and give solutions, we've got to remember this person is in overwhelming pain, and a lot of times, like we said at the beginning of our conversation, they're out joking and laughing. That doesn't mean that person isn't, as a cliche, but dying inside.
Yeah.
So we have to be very careful about going gently with this person.
And I think we can always pray. We can always pray, not necessarily with the person, but praying for that person and asking God to help them. And that means that, there's nothing more powerful, than prayer. And if we can use that faith-filled prayer, then we can often see people coming through incredible things in life. Great. Sophie, is there anything else you would like to add before we close?
I'm sorry, can I just add one thing?
Sure.
Sometimes people don't have anything. They don't have any support group. They don't have any, their life is quite barren to them, and there is nothing to look forward to. There is nothing, they feel they have no choices. But we can validate the very little fact that they are talking to us right now.
Oh, yeah.
We validate that.
Yeah.
And that is a step on the road.
Yeah.
The road forward.
Mm-hmm. Very good, Allene.
That's important. Yep.
Sophie, anything else?
No, I've not much more to add. I think those are really practical tips on how to navigate and walk alongside someone who may be going through one of the most difficult times in their life. And it's really important to, as you said, just drive home the fact that we love them more than anything. And it's not about fixing, it's about being there for them and with them through it. I know, I thought it was brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, Allene.
Allene, thank you very much.